Getting ready for the first NRL Fantasy major bye round. We have 7 teams missing games this week on byes, and we have, 36 players not playing because of State of Origin as well. So it's going to be chaos for your NRL Fantasy side. Luckily, you are guided by 2 shamans of the game. We've got myself, Longy, ex-overall winner and consistent champion, and Biz, who's leading the way this year and dominating. Biz, how well prepared are you feeling for these major bye rounds?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty happy with myself, to be honest. I think I've prepped for the byes pretty well this year. I've had some good things go my way at team lists this week, and both the Origin team lists and the NRL team lists. Quite a few of my players are on the cusp of an Origin call-up, like Hopgood, Horsebra, these guys. They all missed the team, and then guys I didn't have in my team, like Hamiso, they made the team. So looking good for me. I've got 12 at this stage. I'll be upgrading to 13. I've noticed a few teams at the top are looking a bit shaky this round with like 7 or 8 players. So hopefully I can go from that, top 500 mark back to the top 100, top 200 mark this week.
That's juicy. I've had the exact opposite situation. I brought in Burbo. I brought in Andrew Davey, and both of those guys got injured last week. The week I bought them in, and
man, that's so rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people I know on the Burbo boat, and me included, but the Davey one, man, that's got a.
His PPM average is 50 across 80 minutes. That's the thing I was thinking about there. 470k. He got me 3 points last week. He's obviously getting done this week. But look, let's go into this. So we've got a bit of a different segment to start things off. We're going to go into the movers first. So guys who have had big changes to their outlooks coming into this fantasy season. A couple of these guys who are on this list are guys that we talked about last week as ones to wait and see. First one here, Kalyn Ponga. I'm going to jump right in here. There's a lot of things to think about with Kalyn Ponga. Number one, he got dropped from the Queensland Origin side. That isn't a certainty to stay that way throughout the series, but it's a certainty for game 1. So great news is available this week. Number 2, they've dropped Lockie Miller back to the bench, and they're saying Kalyn Ponga is our fullback now. That is fantastic news for his scoring, as he's probably about 20 points better scorer at fullback than he is at 5'8". Number 3, he's been in good form. He had that HIA scare last week, but look, a couple of weeks in a row where he's scoring tries, he's playing good attacking footy. Newcastle will have enough weapons for him to be potent in that team, especially going back to fullback with Jackson Hastings and Tyson Gamble feeding him the ball. So look, for me, he goes from a guy where if he's picked an Origin, he's not a buy. If he stays at 5'8", he's a dodgy buy that I'm probably steering clear of. No Origin back to fullback. Slam dunk move for me. What are you thinking, Biz?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with your analysis. When he missed the Origin side, it was interesting for me, but I was going to skip him. But now there's a fullback. Look, he's a guy who is a perennial 50 average player at fullback. He's 420k, and Miller, who most people have, he's about 550k. You're making 130k going from Miller to Ponga. My only hesitancy with Ponga is he's a guy who's probably going to score you 50, or he's going to get knocked out in the first couple of minutes and get you a 0 or 1. So he can really destroy your round or make your round pretty quickly. So if Knights of the Thursday or Friday game and you see Ponga get knocked out in the second minute, it's going to ruin your whole weekend. But, I'm getting him in my team this week for Miller. I do think that Ponga is going to feature in Origin at some stage, but at 420k playing this week, if I can have him for this week, I'll take it. He's not going to back up from Origin, so you need to make sure that you've got a plan that if he does get called up for game 2 or game 3, you've got people who can take his place. He's not going to back up the week after with his injury history. But yeah, Miller to Ponga, lock it in for me. I think a lot of people are hesitant, but man, like a 420k dual position, superstar of game and fantasy at fullback. Whatever. If he gets knocked out next week, so be it. I'm getting him in my team.
Yeah, the upside's unlimited. We'll go to the next guy here, Damien Cook. No Blues jersey, and he's down about 250k on the start of the year. Look, he's in your team, so you've been watching him closely for a while now. What do you think the reason is behind his decline this year to start things off?
It's really tricky because I never planned to sell him until the Origin period. And when I found out that he wasn't in Origin, he actually is one of the best hookers with a really good buy schedule now. I didn't realize it was 698k. Well, I paid like 950k for him, so this hurts to see. But
yeah, I put that up there. Nice and bold.
Thanks for reminding me. But I'm going to keep him all year now, so it doesn't matter to me. But answering your question, I'm actually not too sure because he's actually playing well in real life. He's not running as much, but he's playing a bit of a different role this year. But if I actually look at hookers across the board, they're just not doing as well as last year. Now, I'm not sure if there was like subtle rule change or the game's kind of moved away compared to last year a little bit. But even if you look at Reece Robson, even Harry Grant, like Harry Grant's, he's carving it up. But like a lot of the other hookers have just come down a bit. I'm not too sure where it is, but I think Cook is a great option. He's locked in 80 minutes. He's going to play around 13 for sure. And if he doesn't make it back to the team, which, I don't think he will unless New South Wales get flogged. I don't think Cook's going back there. But he could play around 19 as well with a really friendly bye schedule. I think he's pretty much I think you need either Robson or Cook this week. Like, there's just such a tier break from what you can have with those two versus everyone else. Like, I think you really have to have one or the other.
You probably have Brandon Smith to sell as well. That's the thing there too. I just want to chime in back on what you were saying about Cook and the Blues. I did hear some comments from some Blues selectors during the week saying that one of the big reasons they were talking about Coruscant over Cook, which I think it was an ex-selector, but still interesting. They're talking about Coruscant over Cook because during game one, they expect a slower ruck. So they're looking for someone who's more creative rather than someone who's going to take advantage of a fast ruck. And look, Cook is all speed, but he's not at that level of creativity that the guy like Coruscant is. So there is a chance that if they forecast a quicker ruck in the later Origin games, and he could sneak into the Blues side. Where he sneaks in, look, if the Blues are winning, which they're favourites to do, then they're not going to drop Coruscant. And they're almost certainly not going to take Hines out of that 14 jersey. So, yeah, I mean, look, $698K, the price is all upside. Like, he's borderline a cash cow.
He's a guy who's averaged 65 like every year for the last 5 years. Like, even if he does make Origin, I would still buy him. You get him this week, and you're getting him at a sub 700K. He's declining in price, but he actually hasn't scored that badly. Like, he's not a 65 guy, but he's like constantly in the 50s, low to mid 50s. I think he's only scored below 50 like once or twice. So he's actually really consistent as well. It's just that he started at such a high price. But if anything, I think that Cook is, and we'll talk about this in another episode, but Cook is a great captaincy option this week as well, because they're going to look to him to take them to the next level after copping a loss against the Eels last week, and Cook not making Origin, that should light a fire under him. I expect him to be playing a strong hand this week. This is the week for a Cook 85 plus score. I reckon he'll crack the ton this week.
I love that. And then Ofahengaue, next guy. Look, he signs at Parramatta, straight to the starting side. I think this one's pretty straightforward. You've got RCG out for a month plus. You've got Madison out for a month plus. You've got Hopgood playing well there. Junior Paulo will miss every major bye round with State of Origin. And Ofahengaue, he comes in. He's a guy who's averaged 54 points last year. He plays all three major bye rounds. He's at 456K because he was out of favour at the Tigers. Again, just a pure upside pick as long as you have space in your mids.
Yeah, I think I'll probably skip him this week just because he misses him next week, and he doesn't. It's not like he's going to go up 50K this week. But I think, especially after the Eels bye next week, they could ramp him up to a 55, 60-minute role where he can average 45 plus, and his price is, like you said, it's just only upside from there.
Juicy. And then Joe Tapine, look, longer-term keeper. You're paying more money there. He's almost at Cook price, but he's gone down too. He's in a weird spot this week in that he goes into lock because Corey Horsburgh moves to the edge for Hudson Young, who made the Origin side. I don't know that that's how they're going to line up on game day. And this is why he's in the movers section. I don't know if they're going to line up Horsburgh as an 80-minute edge back rower. I just can't really see that. I think Horsburgh's been better than Tapine in the last month of footy. And Tapine is a more agile, explosive guy who could maybe play that Nelson or Sofa Solomona role on the edge as well. I could see there. So he might be a guy who lines up on the edge this week. Still a great buy. Look, he's all upside at that price.
I think Tapine came into the league as an edge back row anyway, so it's not like he hasn't played there before. And even if I think he's going to get a pretty big minute stint this week because Hudson Young's an 80-minute player. And then Elliot Whitehead, who's out, is also a big minute player. So there's definitely more minutes in the pack this week. And Tapine is just a keeper at the mid-level, to be honest. So, good analysis.
And then Gags, I'll throw it at you. Are you interested in Gagai?
Yeah, we talked about him last week as a wait and see. It's still ridiculous to me that a centre playing centre could average, 55 in fantasy. He came back down to earth a bit last week with the 20, but good buy schedule. He's another guy kind of like Cook and Ponga that I would not be surprised if he gets picked for game 2 or 3. Probably less so Cook, but like with Ponga and Gagai, I feel they're definitely going to feature at some stage, especially if Queensland lose game 1. I think Ponga and Gagai, they'll be straight back in for game 2 if they cop a bit of a loss in week 1. But other than that, he's expensive, but he's the number 1 center in the game. Like it's a real point of difference. He's got like 1% ownership or even less. If you're a gambler, you want to catch up, or you're going all in, then get Gagai. Like I honestly, I can buy that. Like if I had the funds for it and I needed a center this week, like I'm sorted for centers. If I didn't have centers this week, I'd be going to get Gagai. Could bite you on the bum later down the track because he could go back down to earth, but man, sometimes you just can't predict fantasy. So maybe it averages 55 all year and you're going great.
Yeah, if you had Gagai from round 1, you'd be top 100, near guaranteed. So, look, it's the kind of pod that could get you there. Let's jump into the next group here, and these are guys we've talked about more. They're a bit more straightforward, so we're going to go quick fire, 5 buys, bang, bang, bang. First guy here, Tohu Harris, averages 60-plus when he gets 60-plus minutes. That's all I'm going to say for Tohu. There is some injury risk, but 671K, super value.
Yeah, that's pretty much an easy one. Same with Moses. He's just a gun, like he's probably a tier 1B. Like if Hines and Cleary, maybe Cherry Evans are tier 1A, Moses is right behind them. And this year he's averaging 60 plus. So he plays all the major buy rounds. Get him in your team. And the Eels are finally trending back up as well.
He's been in crazy form. And if they can win 66-18 against the Cowboys this week, then
he's probably got 100 plus. I mean, the other guy you can talk about next to Moses here is Sean Johnson, another half in a similar price range, similar good buy schedule, averaging 60 plus. So Moses or Sean Johnson. Moses got a bit better buy schedule, but Sean Johnson's a good pick as well.
Yeah, I like Moses better, but might be a bit of bias. Then Jermaine Hopgood, 70-71. Look, he's not cheap anymore, but the injury to Madison is massive for Jermaine Hopgood. Ofahengaue doesn't really hurt him too much. When all those guys start to come back, you're going to have to sell Hopgood. So I would just keep that in mind. But you're probably going to be selling him for $850K, and he's going to do a great job for you through Origin. So, easy buy for me. Edge and middle eligible too.
Yeah, not much more to add. I think he's short term, maybe 5-6 weeks until we get the troops back, but he could average 65 until then. So, get him in.
Yeah, juicy. And then Farnworth, Herbie Farnworth, look, he steps up. He scored well in games they've lost. He scored well in games where he hasn't scored tries. He just seems to have a really strong base this year, Herbie Farnworth. We've had enough of a sample size where we can trust that now. 594K, look, you're paying 200K less than what we're talking about for a guy like Dane Gagai. And I think you have the same upside in a Herbie Farnworth as you do in a Gagai. So I like him as a pod. Look, I don't need centers in my team right now, but if I did at 594K,
it's pretty nice. Are you concerned though, like Broncos during the Origin period, and they've also lost 3 of the last 4? They had a big slide last year about this time of the year. Are you concerned, or you think Farnworth is pretty, he's independent of all that. He can play well regardless of how the Broncos go.
Yeah, there are 2 things to throw at that. I mean, look, Adam Reynolds was out last week. That's a hard one. And I think they would have won the week before with Adam Reynolds. They put on a pretty crazy performance without Adam Reynolds, and we're pretty close. So I'm not super worried about their form. The other thing is that we're not seeing Payne Haas carrying injuries. Flegler's playing well enough to get picked for Origin. I think the Broncos will stay solid this year. And I think if they're going poorly, there probably is a bit more of that throw it to Herbie and see what he can do kind of game, which for him and with the way he runs the ball, it's not going to be the worst thing for his base stats. But obviously you do want them winning well through that period. But no, I think he'll still roll. And at 594K, if he was 700K, I'd say he needs tries, he needs attacking stats. But at 594, with the base that he's building up, I'm still okay with it. The last guy I'll throw in here is Tavita Tatola, and look, we talked about him a lot. It's just that he's undervalued. That's all I've got to say. Do you have anything else to add on Tavita Tatola there?
I think this is the third week in a row we've had him here, so I think the thesis hasn't changed. He's a guy who's had some injuries, had some setbacks, so he's at a low price. Just a bit of rehash for the new listeners who might not be sure why we're saying Tatola. Like his minutes are slowly increasing. He's slowly looking back to his best. A lot of players out for the Rabbits this week. Tatola could go back to a big minute role, and he can average 45 plus at 460k with a good buy schedule. So if you need a mid and you don't have the money for the guys at the top of this list, Tatola's your guy.
It's a good segue because he's a bit of a cash cow at a high price. Let's go into the real cash cows though, and this list is bleak. Look, there's some upside to each of these guys, but there isn't really that slam dunk cash cow, I don't think personally, on this list for a long-term sort of acquisition. So when we're talking about like an Oloapu a few weeks ago, that's a slam dunk. That's what we want. Valence Tavare, if he had kept that starting spot, would have been that slam dunk. But I'll throw Samuel Fainu to you first because I know you're pretty keen on him.
Yeah, I don't know if keen is the right word, but I'm a bit higher on him than the other guys here because I think with Fainu, he was the first man off the bench to replace Burbo last week, which is a good sign because they had a bunch of guys on the bench who could play second row. So, Condon, Bullymore, they've all played edge before, but it was actually Fainu who came out there and played on the edge for the remainder of the game. It was about 55 minutes. Now, he's bargain price. It doesn't get lower than 220. Bobo is out for potentially 4 to 6 weeks. Tuangi is probably 4 to 6 weeks away still. So Fainu actually has the opportunity to go run away with this spot a bit. Like he could make it his own. Like I don't think Tuangi was playing that well prior to his injury anyway. His defense was a bit shady. I have not really seen any tape on Fainu. Like I don't know much about him, so if you're a Manly supporter or otherwise have some gossip about him or have some intel, put them in the comments below. Would love to hear it. I'd love to see it. But 220k, the only problem is he's not available at edge or center. The thing with Bobo is he was available at center. Well, Fainu is a mid, so there's a bit of risk about him. He might get 60, 70 minutes in the edge position this week. What that means from a points basis, like he played 55 minutes last week for about 25 points. So even if he gets 5-10 more minutes, it's probably going to be a 30-point player or worse. So I think you can wait and see this week because they've got the bye next week. And if he looks really good this week and you think he's a bit of a scorer, then you can get him in round 15 because he'll play round 16 as well. But otherwise, it's not that exciting. Like you said, it's a pretty bleak week.
For me, he needs to pass the eye test. Like what you're saying about him potentially keeping that spot, that would be the only reason I would buy him. If it looks like he's just going to command that spot. Otherwise, after this week in the major buy round, it's then 2 to 4 weeks before one of those guys is back. And Burbo doesn't command that starting spot by any means. Talangi might, maybe. They went and acquired him. He's been out of form, but yeah. There's upside to that. And then Blake Taafe, look, I'll throw him to you as well because I know you've done some analysis on Taafe and how he's going to play with Latrell there.
Yeah, the thing with Latrell is, as everyone knows, he's had a bit of hammy issues recently, and hammies are the one injury that really you need to manage. Like you need to make sure you're not working too hard on it, and that's why I don't think Latrell, even if he backs up, I think he's going to play a limited role. And Blake Taafe is a really good reserve player, and with the Souths doing so well, I think they might not rely on Latrell over the Origin period as much as they usually would. I think he'll get quite a bit of a rest. I personally think he's not going to back up at least for 1 or 2 of the games. I mean, depending on how tough the Origin battle is, if it's like a scrappy game or if it's a runaway victory or whatever. But Taafe is a guy you probably get 4 or 5 weeks out of because Souths players have a really bad buy schedule if you're an Origin player. So Taafe, if you get 4 or 5 games out of him, he could make 100+ K with how good the Souths are playing, maybe even 150K. But even if you get 4 or 5 good scores out of him over the buy period and you just turn him into a red dot for the rest of the year, that's not the end of the world. But again, like Longy said, none of these cash cows are home run cash cows. They've got pros and cons. Taafe 4 or 5 scores. it's going to be like 2 trades if you want to actually make money out of him when you're going like 100, 150k. So I'm not going to get him, but if you're desperate for a fullback this week, him and Weeks are pretty much the same proposition. I know you kind of been talking about Weeks for a while now, and you looked at him a few weeks ago. Is that pretty similar to what you're thinking for him?
I fell off Weeks, so I was pretty hyped about Weeks when he was playing that bench role because he looked like a super explosive guy. He's obviously very fast. His work rate and involvement was really high coming off the bench. He had that game playing in the halves starting. That's when a lot of people bought him. Had a bit of a dodgy game. He looked Penrith just destroyed Manly in that week, and then he had to play in the centres a bit in that game as well. He got knocked out of that half spot. He's behind Cooper Johns. The great, legendary Jake Arthur goes to the team as well. So, look, the halves pecking order now is Jake Arthur, Daly Cherry Evans, Josh Schuster, Cooper Johns, and then Jake Arthur again. And then KO. If they start Jake Arthur at some point, I'll be stoked. But like, for Weeks, he's got to come in at fullback. He was uninspiring.
Will you move Cherry Evans to centre to play Jake and Arthur?
Cherry Evans isn't Dylan Brown, all right?
Yeah, true.
But yeah, on Weeks though, like he played that game against the Titans, and I thought he was going to pop off in that game, just from what I had seen. He looked, I don't know if he was nervous or took it for granted, or he just wasn't involved in that game, and they took a pretty tough result in that game. For me, he comes in here. He could easily score well, but I'm not forecasting much more than a 25 to 30 point game for him, just from what I've seen. Saying that, maybe he's gone and reflected and he comes back with some intent. So look, I wouldn't go and buy KO Weeks by any means. Also, 261, it's not minimum. You're not getting minimum. I think Fainu is more interesting than Weeks. The plus side there is that Turbo is a guy who can get hurt sometimes, but even then, Tupolotu is on the bench for this team. So Garrick to fullback, Tupolotu in is how they've done it historically. Maybe they do that again. I'll jump to the next guy here, Valence Tavare. And these last two guys are a bit different. They're not in spots to score well as of the current team lists, but they're more a bet on talent. So Valence Tavare first, there's been talk that Brinko Lee could maybe get dropped for him at times. There's, Brinko Lee could get hurt again. There could be another injury to the back line potentially. There's a lot that could happen there. I thought maybe Asako might play fullback this week, and we'd see Valence Tavare, but the Dolphins have gone with Cody Nikorima at fullback to bring Milford in. So they play the first game of the round. I would buy him maybe if he gets a start in that game. But even then, probably not, just because he just doesn't look like he's going to keep that spot. Do you think there's any world where Valence Tavare strings together sort of 4 to 8 games at some point this year?
Look, without injury, I doubt it. Like, to be honest, I'm an owner already. Like, I bought him in the week he debuted because I needed a center. So luckily, I got his 70-odd score. But I actually didn't think he would make the team this week. I thought that Isako would go to fullback as well, but I thought Robert Jennings or Edric Lee or Jack Bostock would play wing, and I just didn't see Whare getting another game until one of the centers goes down, and I think Branko is actually a pretty underrated player. Like, he's not bad. Like, with his experience, and we know that Wayne Bennett loves experience. Like, he hasn't been afraid to give rookies their shot. I mean, look at Katoa, etc. Right, but I think until there's an injury there, like everyone says, it's always going to be the next guy up the cab rank there. So yeah, if he starts this week over Branko, then you'd get him. If there's a reshuffle where it's kind of like Milford back to the bench and Isako to fullback and Vuinse to wing, where it's probably going to be temporary again, then it's probably not worth it. Like,
what if it was a minor injury for Branko?
Yeah, if it was, the thing is with his low break even, if he got 2-3 games on the trot, I think he could make that position his own. The thing is, we've only seen him at his best. I feel like a player with Valence Tavare, there's that high, and then there can also be a real low where they get exploited defensively. And depending on their schedule,
talking about Conrad Hurrell and CSC for Talakai and
Yeah, these
Jacob
guys,
Loco.
they could be unstoppable one day, and then next week, they're just targets in the defensive line. I actually don't know who the Dolphins have the next couple of weeks after this week, but if it's a tough schedule, I can see it going pretty poorly. Obviously, as an owner, I'd love it, if he keeps that spot, but I don't know if it's worth it. People are already starting to run low on trades at this point in time, and you don't really want a guy who could be more than likely deadwood. But if he replaces Branko this week, first game, get him in.
Yeah, he's risky. And the last guy on this list is even more risky. Finefeuiaki, look, 230K is a nice price. He's clearly a talented guy. That's why he's on this list. Outside of that, it all counts against him. So he's not getting the minutes from the bench. Look, Jeremiah Nanai comes back at some point soon. Lukey looks to have locked that spot up as well. Luciano is also there playing well. There are three.
He's playing well. He's not playing
Yeah,
badly
I think he'll make way. But in the middle rotation, if Tamalolo comes back, Ruben Cotter, and look, both those guys are behind Jake Granville when Todd Payton decides for them to be. There probably isn't an opportunity. But look, for Finefeuiaki, if I had a dynasty league with NRL, I might pick him up there just because he looks really good. And he's one of those guys where no one will buy him. But there is a world where he just finds a way into the team a few weeks in a row and suddenly he's 400K. Kind of like that Harrison Edwards rise. There is that world there. I'm not backing it, but
he could even just be a bench player who's works his way up from 20, 25 minutes to 35, 40 minutes and plays really explosive and scores a try here or there because he looks like a guy who could find the line. Like you said, when he's coming on, he's looking threatening. And he can just quickly rise to 400K just on the back of 30s. So,
and the Cowboys,
I don't hate it.
Yeah, Cowboys conceded 66 points to the Tigers last week. So, if a team's going to make some crazy changes and disrespect some veterans, that's the team that's going to do it. Yeah. All right, look, last group here, traps. These guys are the guys you don't want to buy, and a couple of those guys we talked about probably traps as well. But 5 guys that are traps, 5 guys that I've had some questions about that we want to steer clear from. First one, Cody Nikorima. Look, you're an owner. For me, he moves to fullback. That doesn't really change much for his scoring. 424K is the big thing. So when he was 254K, awesome. There's a risk there, but it's a cool buy. He's 424K now. There's just no world where he's a good buy, right?
No, I have him. I'll ride him out for another week or two, but doesn't have the base stats this year. He's not the dominant playmaker anymore. Tatola is the dominant playmaker now with Milford in the team. Cody's not kicking. He doesn't tackle that much, and when he does get his tackle count up, he also misses a few tackles. He's just getting a lot of assists and got a try last week, but at 424K, if you go back to our buys and guys like Tatola, 450K, 460K, you much rather go there instead.
Steer clear. And then Ben Murdoch-Masila. Look, this guy has made a career out of being about 306K in fantasy. And here he is
275 to 300, that's his sweet spot.
Look, he sometimes scores a few tries and gets to 400, but no, don't do it. Look, we get a lot of questions about whoever the Dragons decide to start in that edge spot each week. Billy Burns came through a bit. We told people to steer clear. He got dropped before the game.
Hey, speaking of Dragons edges, it's probably a bad time to bring this up because he's missing this week, but Jaden Sewer, we were probably the only podcast or footy source that talked him up 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he has bloody delivered, right? I know, unfortunately, he's got an injury for this week, but if you picked him up when we were on that one, I just want to call that out because even you didn't believe me. I mean, you didn't want to put him in here.
Look, I saw the upside, but it was different. And he scored a bunch of tries. What did he average over the last 4 weeks? 60 something?
Probably not that high. Look, to be honest, I haven't really been watching him. It was just, I didn't really believe in it myself.
No. When you said to buy me of 600K, he's 660 now. And he hit scores of 55, 53, 53, and 61. So
it's not bad. 55, 56 average. That's pretty good. I mean, feel like it.
600.
I mean, you bought him for around 13, and he's not there, so maybe that shouldn't gloat.
Yeah, still a good pick. Still a smart pick.
Better than
and then,
Ben Murdoch-Masila, anyway.
better than Murdoch. So yeah, bad news for the Dragons. But Matt Doorey, do you have any inkling that Parramatta make way for Doorey somehow in this 17 long term?
No, he kind of like surprising because I think he's actually playing pretty well this year. And when he went back to the bench and he played that like 25, 30-minute role, he actually looked really good. So I'm surprised
he was fantastic.
Cut. Yeah, like that 25, 30-minute impact role for him he was gunning it. Like he's just a hard line runner on that edge there, running at smaller halves and centers. Thought he played really well. So I'm surprised he didn't make it back to the team. But with Davey there, with Offa there, I'm pretty set on second row. I was like, he'll be there short term, but he's not traditionally a great scorer anyway. Even if he gets 80 minutes, like a 30, 35 minute guy. So I would stay clear of him.
And then Granville, I'll talk on Granville. I'll give you Metcalf to finish. So Granville, 390k. No, he was 250k at one point. That was when he's on the slide now. He's losing his minutes. Taafe back soon. He may score well this week. Not again after that. And then Luke Metcalf, do you think he keeps the spot long term? Because if he does, 319k is nice. If he does keep that spot, do you think he has the makings of a good fantasy scorer?
Yeah, I think Metcalf will be a stronger scorer than Tamil Martin, who is his main competition for this role. Metcalf just looks like a dynamic runner off the ball. He's not going to be a traditional half who scores his points through like 500 kick meters a game. He's going to kind of play more. I think he's going to be like a budget Dylan Brown, to be honest. Like just a lot of running the ball, low tackle breaks, hopefully line breaks. He's really elusive. He can break the line. But I think he's a better player for the Warriors than Tamir Martin. But I think the Warriors would have liked what Tamir Martin brings as a foil, like a controlling, just a level head next to Sean Johnson. I can't really see him, taking that spot. I think, a couple of guys in my fantasy chat raised the point that, Metcalf is a better fit for the bench, just a bigger body, so versus TMM. So I think Metcalf probably just gets a bench role. But if he keeps that spot, and you can probably just wait and see a couple of weeks, and if he keeps a spot over TMM, then get him in your team. I think he'll be one of the best. You're probably like 350 to 400k when you actually buy him, but I think that's still good value for a player like him.
Yes, I think we got a bit of dispute on this. Like we're sitting in the same spot in terms of the facts. The one thing I'm leaning on there with Metcalf is that he has the same opportunity that KO Weeks had when people were buying KO Weeks. KO Weeks did exactly what you're talking about and didn't take it by the hand, and he was dropped for the more stable option. Metcalf, I think Metcalf has shown enough in trial games and other appearances and all that sort of thing to show that he's going to gash a couple of teams while he's got the chance. I think he's going to be a bit of a sensation. I just think the fact that the Broncos are missing Flegler, Payne-Haas, Pat Carrigan through the middle, and, look, it's a change of fullback as well, Tristan Saylor. I don't know how he's going to go with steering the troops around in defense. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for a guy like Metcalf to sort of make some inroads. So my thinking there is that I haven't got him in my buys right now. Like, I haven't bought him. But he has the upside to make that spot his own. And if he does keep that spot, it's because he's playing well. And everything he does to play well will convert to fantasy points. So he's not going to be one of those guys who has a good game and doesn't score well in fantasy. So for me, it's a big gamble. But I'm tilting towards a mid-tier, low-tier sort of cash cow with him. But look, let's revisit that one in a few weeks' time. And let's see. I just think he gets it done, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, but I just feel like the Warriors are a bit attached to TMM. So,
and the fact that they're going well hurts Metcalf.
Yeah.
If they were going worse, then they would just blood him and believe in the future. Whereas right now they're trying to win the comp. Like they're looking at the team and winning the comp. So.
With Metcalf in the preseason, he went gangbusters. He was like the best player. Do you reckon if he was fit for round 1, he plays over Tierman?
I think so. I think so.
If you think that, then he's worth a pick. Because if you think that he's ahead of Tierman when everyone's fully fit, it's not like Tierman was setting the world on fire himself, like as an individual. So.
Yeah. No, I'm very high on Metcalf and very low on Tierman in general, compared to most people. So, yeah, it's a bit biased. But anyway, look, let us know in the comments if you think Metcalf's that guy. Drop your trades into the comments too. We'll talk to you about those and join us on our captain's video next. We'll see you there.